English made easy. Hey guys! Bored of those vocab lists? Me too. At 1 Degree North Companion, we're turning wordly wise into an adventure to make learning actually interesting. Let's jump in.
All right, let's just get one thing straight. Forget everything you think you know about survival. Today, we're diving into a masterclass in engineering, one that wasn't perfected in a lab, but in the harshest classroom on the entire planet. And our subject? The one and only camel.
And when I say engineering marvel, I'm not talking about some high-tech robot or super advanced metal alloy. Nope. The ultimate survival machine wasn't built, it was evolved. It was designed piece by piece to thrive where pretty much everything else just withers and dies.
And where does this machine operate? The desert. I mean, we are talking about a truly rigorous world of extremes, a place where the sun literally sears the landscape and water, well, it vanishes in the blink of an eye.
So think about it. In a place that seems engineered specifically to end life, what kind of creature could possibly be king? Well, it's the camel, the undisputed, undeniable master of this domain.
But to really, truly understand its genius, we need to peel back the layers. We have to look past the myths and dive right into its survival code, starting with its most famous feature.
And here's where most of us get it wrong. We're all told the hump is basically a giant water tank, right? Well, it's not. Not even close. It's a highly concentrated reservoir of fat. It's a built-in pantry that the camel taps into when food gets scarce.
And this design choice is all about being ridiculously efficient. So why pack all the fat in one place? It's simple and it's brilliant. If that fat was spread all over its body, the camel would basically be wearing a thick winter coat in one of the hottest places on Earth. By storing it all in the hump, it can get rid of body heat so much more effectively. That is just incredible thermal design. But the camel's efficiency goes way beyond just storing energy. You know, with that slow, kind of plodding walk, you might think it's oblivious to the world around it. That couldn't be further from the truth. This animal is hyper-aware. Its senses are so sharp it can reportedly smell water from miles away. It's always scanning, always processing its surroundings. So let's talk about water for a second. And I want you to remember this number, 40%. That's the percentage of its own body's water a camel can lose, and just keep going, without a single sign of fatigue. Now, just to put that in perspective for you and me, a human is in serious, life-threatening danger after losing just 12%. The camel has a superpower of endurance literally built into its DNA. And what happens when it finally does find a water source? It can quench that incredible thirst with astonishing speed. We're talking up to 15 gallons in one go. It's like watching a biological machine refuel at a rate that just defies belief.
Okay, so let's zoom in a bit and look at the anatomy of this masterpiece. From its internal systems to its external hardware, every single part of the camel is a piece of custom engineering built for the extremes of the desert. And the key idea here, the word we got to keep in mind, is adaptation. The camel didn't just learn to put up with the desert, it became one with it. Its body evolved over thousands and thousands of years to perfectly match every challenge its home could throw at it.
Just take the eyes, for instance. They have 3 lines of defense. First, you've got these double rows of long, thick eyelashes that act like a screen to block sand. Then there's a transparent third eyelid. This is so cool! That sweeps from side to side, just like a windshield wiper, clearing away sand while the camel can still see. This is how it deals with the sun's glare and full-on sandstorms.
And how in the world does it walk on that soft, shifting sand without sinking? Well, its feet are the answer. They're incredibly broad and soft, and they spread the animal's weight out perfectly. They are, quite literally, nature's own all-terrain snowshoes. And all of this contributes to the camel's very unique gait, which is really just the technical term for its special way of walking.
And this explains it perfectly. Unlike a horse, which moves its legs diagonally, a camel moves both legs on the same side of its body forward at the same time. This creates this very distinct side-to-side rocking motion. And it's this exact gait that earned it the nickname, the ship of the desert. It literally sways back and forth like a boat on the waves.
But the camel isn't just a biological marvel, it's a historical one too. For thousands of years, this animal was the literal engine that powered civilization in some of the world's most impossible places. From the moment it was domesticated, the camel became the absolute lifeline for entire civilizations. It made it possible to create trade routes that connected huge empires across these vast, unforgiving deserts. It was a living symbol of wealth, travel, and sheer endurance.
And it was so much more than just a bus. For the people of the desert, the camel was a walking, breathing department store. Its hair gave them wool for clothes. Its hide made their tents. It provided milk and even meat. Entire cultures were built around this one incredible animal.
So what can we take away from this masterclass in survival? Well, it actually leaves us with a pretty fascinating design challenge. Look, it's true that technology has caught up. A four-wheel drive truck can carry heavier loads faster across the sand. The age of the camel as the main way to get around might be fading, but that doesn't diminish the absolute perfection of its biological design one bit. It's a reminder that nature is the ultimate engineer. Which brings us to a final thought for you. Imagine you're an engineer, and you're tasked with creating a life form to survive the harsh, dry, and extreme environment of another planet, like Mars. Which of the camel's perfect adaptations would you copy first? Would it be its incredible water efficiency, its all-terrain feet, or maybe its fortress-like eyes? The perfect blueprint might already be walking the Earth.
Hope you guys enjoyed that last lesson. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ready for more? The next one starts right now.
Imagine spending a quarter of a century exploring a world so advanced, so different that when you finally get home, nobody believes a word you say. Seriously, this isn't some fantasy story. This is the real life of Marco Polo, a man whose truth was so enormous that it got him laughed at, thrown in prison, and somehow ended up inspiring a whole new age of discovery. All right, let's get into it. So picture it. The docks of Venice, the year is 1295. A man steps off a ship, looking like he's been to the ends of the earth and back. But instead of a hero's welcome, he gets ridicule. His stories about a faraway empire are just too much. To his neighbors, his tales weren't just tall, they were, in their words, fantastic, as in totally impossible. And that's really the core of this whole thing. It makes you ask a huge question. Was Marco Polo just an incredible liar, or was he a man who had seen the future? A future his own world wasn't even close to understanding yet. But here's where the story takes a wild turn. Polo's incredible account, it wasn't written in some fancy study or a royal court. No, its origin story is way more dramatic. We have to jump ahead 3 years from his return home. And we're not going to a palace, we're heading to a prison cell. That's right, he was commanding a Venetian ship in a war against Genoa, a rival city, when he gets captured and tossed in prison. You'd think that would be it, right? The tragic end to an amazing life. But you know, history had something else in mind. Because this imprisonment, what looked like a total disaster, turned out to be the single biggest opportunity of his entire life. Think about it. Locked away with nothing but time, he could finally put all his memories in order and dictate his whole epic journey to another prisoner. The key thing to remember is, without that prison, we might never have heard his story at all. Now, to really get why his stories sounded so nuts to everyone back home, we have to rewind. Let's go back to the world where he spent 17 years of his life, the Mongol Empire under the great Kublai Khan. It was a place of shocking, almost unbelievable contrasts. And this really shows you that shift in power. Just look at the difference here. About 50 years earlier, Kublai Khan's grandfather, Genghis Khan, was a feared tyrant. His method was pretty simple: vanquish your enemies. He built an empire based on sheer tyranny. But his grandson, Kublai Khan, was totally different. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a brilliant administrator, and he ruled his enormous empire with a surprisingly kind and thoughtful approach. Kublai Khan's role was benevolent. He actually wanted to do good for his people. He was kind. And it was exactly this quality that created an environment where a young foreigner from Venice could not only stay alive, but actually rise to the top. So how in the world does a teenager from Venice become the trusted advisor to the most powerful man on the planet? Well, it wasn't just luck. It turns out Marco Polo had a very specific set of skills that made him absolutely invaluable to the emperor. The Khan could see Polo was incredibly smart. But way more important than that, he was discreet. In a court that was just boiling with plots and power struggles, Polo was a complete outsider. He had no family ties, no side he was secretly rooting for. He was the perfect neutral observer. which meant his reports were pure and his loyalty was to the Khan and the Khan alone. And in a place like that, being discreet wasn't just about being polite. It was a critical survival skill. It meant you could be trusted with the most sensitive secrets, which made you the perfect person to be the emperor's eyes and ears. And that's exactly the role he fell into. For 17 long years, Kublai Khan sent Polo on extensive missions all across Asia. We're talking from modern-day Vietnam all the way to Afghanistan. He was an imperial agent, observing everything, learning, and reporting back on the Khan's vast kingdom. But, 17 years is a very long time to be away from everything you know. Polo, who is now a rich and powerful man in his own right, was just deeply homesick. He missed the canals of Venice, and he finally made the tough call to ask the emperor if he could relinquish his duties and go home. Now, this was not an easy ask. The emperor held Polo in such high esteem, he really didn't want to let his trusted friend and advisor leave. But in the end, seeing how much Polo wanted to go home, the great Khan gave his consent. So, after an absolutely brutal 3-year journey, he's finally back in Venice. But the world he came from was so fundamentally different from 13th century Europe that his facts, well, they sounded like pure fantasy. So what were these so-called lies anyway? What were the normal, everyday things he described that were just too much for the people of Venice to wrap their heads around? Okay, get this. He described black stones you could dig out of the ground that burned for heat, what we call coal. He talked about giant serpents that could swallow a man. He was describing crocodiles. And the biggest shocker of all, he described a kind of official alchemy where the emperor could take a piece of paper, stamp it, and turn it into money. To Europeans who were lugging around heavy gold and silver coins, this sounded like actual magic. And that is the absolute key to this whole story. The things Polo was describing as just normal parts of life in the East, coal, crocodiles, paper money, were seen in the West as marvels. They were things so amazing, so wonderful, they just couldn't possibly be real. Because of all these incredible stories, Polo got a nickname, and it wasn't a nice one. And yet, the book he dictated from that prison cell would become one of the most exciting and important travel books ever written. Polo was constantly using the word millions to try and explain the sheer scale of what he saw. Millions of people, millions of tons of gold. His fellow Venetians found this so ridiculous, they started calling him Il Milione, basically Mr. Millions. And that name stuck with him for the rest of his life. But his book had a secret ingredient that made it a bestseller. The guy he was sharing a cell with, this Rustichello de Pisa, he wasn't just some random prisoner. He was a professional writer who wrote popular adventure and romance novels. It was the perfect team-up. Polo had the unbelievable facts, and Rustichello knew how to spin them into a thrilling story that people would want to read for centuries. And that brings us to the very end of his life. As Marco Polo was dying, with his family and a priest gathered around, they gave him one last chance. They begged him, for the sake of his soul, to finally admit it was all made up, to relinquish all the lies he told. His answer is one of the most amazing last lines in history. He looked at them and said, "I have not told half of what I saw." He didn't take anything back. In fact, he doubled down, insisting that reality was even bigger, even more incredible than the stories they had mocked him for his entire life. And that leaves us with one final thought. Polo's book would end up on the nightstands of future explorers, even Christopher Columbus, inspiring them to go see the wonders he described. His whole life is this incredible lesson in the courage it takes to hold on to your truth when the world just isn't ready to hear it. So you have to ask yourself, if that were you, faced with all that disbelief, would you give up on your truth?
Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.